welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be back.
Are you back in LA?
I am. It's funny, the last time I dialed in, the tariffs dropped, I think, the minute I hung up with you guys. So
Yeah. It was
very
4
timely.
p.m. that day, our time.
I was
Eastern.
I was in such a haze. I think I texted you, Quaid. I was like, "What's the reaction over in Switzerland?" And you're like, "Not good."
Not good. But now we've seen things. There's been a pause. There's been ups and downs.
Well, there's still the 10% base tariff.
Yes.
Correct.
So what was the whole journey throughout Watches and Wonders? Very funny timing. Good to be there on the ground. Take us through the reaction as things developed and where the heartbeat of the industry is right now.
Yeah, and I think you can split the conversation kind of between the primary market and the secondary market, and so I'll intentionally walk through that. On the primary side, I think all the meetings I had the day after chatting with you guys, the tariffs dropping, there was a lot of like the Spider-Man meme pointing at each other, like not really knowing what to do right now. And I think you can split the reaction from brands kind of by the type of brand they are. You have like the giant, massive brands that everyone knows, like the Rolexes and the Pateks and the APs of the world. And their reaction is decidedly different than some of the brands that sit kind of in the middle of the market. For every brand that isn't these like very, very, very top tier elite brands, their focus was how quickly can I get product to the US? And whether it was functional products, watches that are just parts, like they just wanted to move everything to the US as possible from most of the meetings that I was having. On the larger brand side, I think they had the luxury of sitting and waiting and seeing what was going to happen. You saw the Rolex of the world and things like that take their time. And the initial answer that I got from secondary feedback from like authorized dealers meeting with Rolex that week was the large feedback that Rolex tended to give in that moment was like, we don't want to pass this on to the customer, but we're not going to eat the cost of these tariffs either. So we're just going to hold off. And the main focus point was we'll make it harder to buy outside of your local markets. Because I think a lot of the authorized dealers in the US are all of a sudden saying, what happens when all of my core customers decide that it's actually cost efficient to prioritize that flight to Paris?
Oh, interesting.
So buy that watch there. So
yeah.
The thinking was, how do we keep it in the local markets? Unclear how they'll hold that out, right? So
that's really tricky. Yeah.
That's what was happening on the primary market in the moment. On the secondary market, in the US particularly, I think you saw a lot of dealers think it was an amazing moment for a second where all of a sudden the inventory that was existing in their lots in the US was much more valuable than it was, a few minutes before the tariffs were live.
Yeah.
And so on the secondary side, you saw it really came down to like what type of dealer and what your economics are. If you're a dealer that happened to have a lot of inventory and you don't have a hard time stocking that inventory, again, you have great sources. You had a lot of folks that just saw deals come through in an increase and they just sold them. Like they moved product and that was the name of the game. And then you saw a lot of other dealers try to opportunistically jump their prices, 10+% to all of a sudden increase that value. So we saw the best weekend we've ever seen after the tariffs in the sense that there was a huge increase in demand and everyone was out trying to buy those watches. And then the prices, I would say, a lot of them are 10-15% more than they typically would. We haven't seen a lot of like the craziness, like no one's pricing and selling at 30+% to try to match the 31% move. And then since they announced the 90-day moment, I think things have chilled out a little bit. We're still seeing pricing being up 10-ish% on a lot of the sales that we're seeing come through. But it's really interesting to see what dealers are going to do. I think it's a question of if you believe the 31% is going to hold. And if you do, I think you're starting to stock up right now. If you don't believe it's going to hold and it's purely a bargaining chip, then I think you're kind of sitting and waiting out and seeing what happens next.
Were there any American watch manufacturers there just like popping champagne, like the Hamiltons or the RGMs, just being like, I've been waiting for this. I'm finally going to catch up to Patek?
Not a ton. It's very Swiss centric while you're there.
It's very Swiss centric.
It certainly would be a good moment to be. But it was like a lot of these brands were lamenting because, especially on the independent side, like they had just opened up New York boutiques or they had just signed the lease in LA or whatever it is. And so the question was, how do we get product there? And a lot of the independent and smaller brands, the answer kind of became like, I'm willing to forget the US market for a second. Like,
Wow.
can I come up with other SKUs in Europe that make up the revenue I lose in the US? Or can I just incentivize, especially on the 6-figure plus pieces, can I incentivize an experiential moment where I take my best collectors and I organize a trip where they come to Geneva and hang out with me as the CEO, and they buy their pieces there, right?
Yeah. And is that I mean, obviously that's like probably not completely kosher with the tariffs, but watches are unique in that if you buy one and you throw it in your suitcase and you're wearing it as you come across, like how would they ever know that you bought it while you were on that trip, right? That's just the nature of the game.
I think most people, they buy it, strap it on, and they walk out.
Yeah, makes sense.
What about, so one of the big concerns of the last week is that even, for example, auto manufacturers that make cars in the US, a lot of those parts come from overseas and specifically China.
Yeah.
For the Holy Trinity brands, are they making every single individual part in Switzerland? I've seen those claims thrown around. It almost is inconceivable, but it seems to be the case that they're not dealing with, the same reciprocal tariffs from China or anything like that. But I'd love to get your point of view there.
Yeah, I think for most of the brands that we're talking about, everything's made in-house, and even a lot of the brands that are using generic movements, like they're buying generic Swiss movements for the majority case, and like these $10,000 AOV plus.
Oh, did we
There are
lose
a number of brands though that will manufacture or use parts from other places, and then they'll be hit with those tariffs 100%, especially on like I hate to say the word cheaper, but on the kind of cheaper
less
model.
expensive.
Less expensive is the right word. You're right.
What about any further thoughts on the land dweller? Were you surprised at where it's being priced on the secondary market at all?
Where is it being priced?
I think the steel is roughly sitting around high 30s, low 40s. Is that correct?
Yeah, we haven't seen any come through yet. So I'm yet to see like a transaction or a listing on Bezel for it. So kind of waiting to see where that lands. But yeah, I mean, double retail. I said that last week. I think that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Wow.
Since I spoke with you, I had a chance to like see it in the metal and put it on my wrist and play with it a little bit, and I liked it a lot. I didn't think I was going to like it as much as I did. Frankly, I didn't want to like it. Not a hater at all, but it's just Rolex has this thing where they drop a model and it's just always good. Like there's an executed finesse in everything that they make happen, and sometimes it's fun when it doesn't work out, maybe, and it just always works out. So it's quite nice. I like the rose gold example better.
Yeah.
But
so what is the base price at retail for a Rolex Land Dweller?
I think this steel example is 14.
14.
I think is what it's priced at.
More than double. And then when the first one comes through, can you talk to me a little about like how you think about that deal on Bezel? Are you going to push that person to do an auction? Is that a better move for someone who's sitting on a land dweller who's thinking about selling it, or should they just try and price it through the normal marketplace?
I think we'll leverage the auction probably to do it. We did that with the Cubitus too. Like we sold, I think we sold, if not the first Cubitus at auction, one of the first to go Cubit Eye to come out at auction. And I think we'll do the same thing on the land dweller side. The fun thing is like the folks that are buying the initial examples of the land dweller are doing so exclusively to be one of the first owners of the land dweller. I think it's like that is you'll pay a premium for that, certainly. The same thing happened with the Cubitus and any of these like kind of new drops. If you want to be courtside wearing this watch and have everyone know that you got it first, then obviously you're paying a premium for that. I don't know where it's going to settle though. Like I imagine the premium for the initial examples will be certainly over double retail. But then like, is it going to be evaluated like it's in a Royal Oak, kind of like very hyped? Is it going to settle to be similar to a Datejust where it trails, it's a little bit above retail, but it's, not as exciting? I don't know. It kind of splits the middle there. Obviously I'm leaning more towards the hype train, but
the thing that makes me think it potentially pretty sustainable is just it's a great looking watch and it seems to wear really well. I think I saw the picture you posted and it just looks great. It's hard to not like, even if you're not a Rolex guy traditionally.
I liked it when I saw it.
What's the sentiment around Patek right now?
Yeah.
I felt like the general the reaction to the Cubitus couldn't have been worse online. I mean, like so many people just didn't like it. I think it looks fine. It wears well, but like, what's the feeling around the brand? Last week.
Yeah, I think like it was cool to see them double down on a lot of like traditionally interesting Patek models, like that are deviations from the sports models. Like, there was a really badass Calatrava that came out in platinum with the salmon dial, and it's incredible. And I was my favorite watch in all of Watches and Wonders, to see in the metal. And they came out with the 40 millimeter Cubitus, which I think is a very fresh take on the Cubitus. The other one is just quite massive and doesn't really feel right in the wrist, in my opinion. I think the vibe against the Cubitus is like similar to Rolex. Patek tends to not miss. Like they kind of bat 1,000 when they do things, and I think everyone wants these big brands to catch an L so they can talk shit about it and feel like they're able to say that. So I think the Cubitus like paired with a bit of like an interesting take that felt maybe like it was overly modernized from a marketing campaign, like didn't sit well with a lot of early collectors. But yeah, I don't know. I think like I put the 40 millimeter one on. I liked it. It's like they make great watches. It's a little bit angular, and I'm a bigger fan of like a 5711 Nautilus. But if I was allocated one of those things, I would certainly wear it and I would rock it.
Love it. What any interesting takeaways around the secondary market? You were on a panel specifically about the secondary market. Was there anything? I'm curious what your major points were and anything else you kind of learned from other people that may have been on the panel or just that attended the event.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear like how the brands are thinking about the secondary market and how the difference from how we're thinking about it, and just I think where it's going. And I think it's, we entered the space when the secondary market from a brand perception was kind of like, oh, don't dip your toe into it, buy primary only. And now to see that, I was in a panel next to Vacheron Constantine, I was in Sotheby's, and you have, a bunch of representatives from all the top brands at the panel. It's quite cool to see that these primary brands are now embracing the secondary market as something that's quite interesting. And I think it allows customers to feel comfortable kind of interacting with the space as long as they're asking the right questions and they're making sure that they're focusing on authenticity and they're buying from reputable sources. And so it's been awesome for our business because it allows us the avenue to double down on our initial goal, which was just make a really, really safe, comfortable experience to transact in the secondary market, lower the barrier of entry to buying your first watch, but also just generally, if you don't want to wait on a wait list, come through and transact and buy the things you want. And that's why like the tariff conversation was super interesting for the secondary market, because if the premium from, on a lot of these pieces from the secondary market to retail is close to 30%, all of a sudden, if a primary market watch is 31% up from a cost perspective, that delta is certainly meaningfully decreased. Do I actually want to wait on a wait list any longer, or should I just buy one that's available in the market in the US? Of course, sellers know that and they're pricing it up 10%, but it still makes that difference smaller than it was. And so all of a sudden, maybe it's not as appealing to wait 2 years to get that Royal Oak versus just buying it right now and getting it when I want it.
Never wait to buy a Royal Oak. Always buy one just immediately.
Just do it. I'm curious, how does influencer marketing work in the, for a company like Rolex when, it feels like there's just this permanent stream of images coming out from the most influential celebrities in the world. And whenever I see one of the pictures, because I've been like involved with influencer creator marketing forever, I'm always looking at the image. I'm like, does this athlete always roll out of bed and want to wear a Rolex? Like, does Tom Brady always want to roll out of bed and wear like the Rolex, Submariner of the day? Or is there some type of, sort of transaction happening behind the scenes, whether it's free watches or, it's totally possible that they just love the watches and there's enough of them out there. But I'm curious if you have any insight there.
Yeah, and it was a big influencer marketing year for Rolex. Like prior to Watches and Wonders, they hinted that there would be like a massive announcement, and we were all kind of spiraling. Like, is it a new model? Are they launching a new platform? Like what's going on? And they just announced Leonardo DiCaprio as an ambassador, and they dropped a whole like Rolex family page where it talks about like all aspects and touch points of creative entertainment, sports, whatever, the dominance they have on like really influential people.
Yeah,
And then obviously,
they call their family page a celebration of human achievement, and it's so
yeah,
funny because I didn't see the announcement about Leo, but I just Instagram just like serves me pictures of celebrities wearing watches, and I'm always just like Leo doesn't go anywhere without a Rolex on, and it seems like now it's like okay, yeah, he's contracted to basically be like don't leave the house without a Rolex. And everywhere he goes, he's just getting photographed, and it's just sort of like that natural marketing.
yeah, and it's funny because I mean Leo was a tag guy for a really long time. Like there's that story where the in Wolf of Wall Street, he's wearing what looks like I believe it's like a vintage GMT Rolex, but it's actually a Tag Heuer that they had like intentionally made to look like it was like an old 80s, not like stock markety looking watch, but it
Crazy.
was from Tag. So I think the interesting part you mentioned Tom Brady. Like Tom Brady was an IWC ambassador for a really long time. Uh, I love those brands. I think like it's a lot easier for those guys to be a Rolex ambassador than maybe another brand that they don't wear as much. When you ask the initial question of like, do I feel comfortable wearing this everywhere? I would love to be a Rolex ambassador. I think they're very lucky because they tap into the brand that everyone wants to wear a lot of the most. Same with the APs of the world. They have a lot of amazing ambassadors there. Um, but yeah, I think there's undeniably a set of collectors that don't want to be ambassadors because they want to wear a diverse collection, right? Like you saw the same thing. I remember sitting down with some early investors in Goat, and they capitalized that in the sneaker space where you had athletes and folks that didn't want to just wear Nikes when they stepped out. They wanted to wear a more diverse set of streetwear and shoes and whatever it is. And like Goat became the business that allowed you to catalyze that and wear multiple things. I think same thing is happening in the watch space, and that's why I'm so excited to build kind of consumer brand around the secondary market. If it's like you can get to a place where you can have a watch sponsorship, but it's like more of a secondary oriented one. So you're making the statement that I like wearing watches, but I have a diverse collection. I'm not necessarily bound to one specific brand. That being said, not a bad gig to be a Rolex ambassador. I think it's pretty good.
What are some of the known unknowns in the watch industry for the rest of the year? What are the things that we might expect announcements around, but we don't have the final details on? If we want to be completely dialed in going into the next Watches and Wonders, what should we be tracking today?
Yeah, I think like the immediate term known unknowns is like kind of a general like I don't know what's going to happen with tariffs. It's going to change everything from that perspective, or is it going to fizzle out and everything's going to go back to normal?
Got it. So we might concretize that by saying something like if we see an increase in Rolex's stated prices on their website, that would be a reaction to the tariffs, right?
Precisely.
Like
Yeah. Like are those prices going to be passed on to the consumer?
Yeah.
And then I think like the consistent known unknowns that are always fun to posit ideas on in the watch community are like what's coming next, what's being updated next. We were talking about this via text before the episode, but like there's a very cyclical process that exists every year for a lot of these major brands. Like Rolex pretty much exclusively drops models that are in catalog in Watches and Wonders. So all year, the watch community is throwing out their ideas, making renderings of what's going to happen next. The introduction of the Chat GPT image product has been funny to see because you're seeing all of a sudden like anyone can render a green whatever GMT or whatever makes happen. So and so the way that typically works is a lot of the investigative Instagram journalists in the watch space will look at what Rolex has trademarked or patented. Like Rolex trademarked Land Dweller a number of months before dropping Land Dweller, and everyone knew that, but it was like I didn't know what they were going to do with that. And then you'll get renderings of the watches that are coming out, and you don't know if that came from someone's Photoshop file or if that's real.
Yeah.
And then to go tie this home with the influencer marketing, like Federer wore a Land Dweller somewhere in the Swiss Alps and dropped it on Instagram, and it looked unintentional, but I'm sure it was intentionally, very much planned. But So I think a lot of the known unknowns are like what's coming next, what's going to be dropped, and then what's going to be discontinued and replaced.
Got it.
That changes the market significantly.
Yeah, that's very fun. Well, it's such a fun market to follow. It's so interesting. It has all the drama of like, oh, speculation about the next iPhone with the fake renders, except the iPhone hasn't changed at all, and so no one really cares anymore. But it's like in the watch world, it's like we're going from iPhone 3GS to iPhone 4 like every single year. So thanks for coming on and chatting with us.
Great to see you, Quaid.
You too, guys. Thanks.
We'll talk
Thanks
to
for
you
the
soon.
insight. Talk
Okay.
soon.